Welcome. I hope this is working. Welcome to Neuralink live update. We're going to tell you about the progress of the first patient with Neuralink, Roland, and a recap of the progress there. Then talk about what changes we were making for the second patient, which we're hoping to do an implant in the next week or so. And this is for our first product, which is called telepathy, which enables you to control a computer or a phone just by thinking. So we'll start off with just some introductions. DJ, you want to start?
Hi everyone, my name is DJ Seo. I'm an electrical engineer and a chip designer by training. I led the design of several generations of the Neuralink implant. Currently, I was on the founding team and currently a president.
I'm Matthew McDougall. I'm a practicing neurosurgeon and head of neurosurgery at Neuralink.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, head of brain interfaces applications.
And I'm Bliss. I'm a software engineer at Neuralink, trying to figure out how to turn brain activity into cool stuff in the world.
All right, thank you. So let's see. So we'll just get going into the presentation. Our first product is something, like I said, we call telepathy, which enables the person with the Neuralink implant to control their phone or computer just by thinking. And once you can control your phone or computer, you can essentially control almost anything, literally just by thinking. So there's no eye tracking or anything. It is purely your thoughts. This is really quite a profound device that can help a lot of people who have lost the connection between their brain and body. Imagine people like Stephen Hawking, imagine if he could communicate at the same speed as someone who still had the connection to their brain and body. It's really something that can help millions of people around the world. And it's part of our overall goal of enabling very high bandwidth connection between the brain and the rest of the world and your computers. The long-term goal, which sounds a little esoteric, is to mitigate the civilization risk of AI by having a sort of closer symbiosis between human intelligence and digital intelligence. But that'll take many years. Along the way, we're going to help solve a lot of brain injury or spinal injury issues. And then with our first product, telepathy, that's going to be really quite profound. There is also potential long-term for bridging the gap. So if there are damaged or severed neurons, being able to span the gap between the brain's motor cortex to the spine to enable someone to use their body again. I think that would be very exciting, and that is something that is possible in the long term. And then our second product, which we've demonstrated to work with monkeys, is Blindsight, which would enable someone who is completely blind, or lost both eyes, or completely lost their optic nerve to be able to see. So that's something that we hope to demonstrate in the future. So this just gives you a sense of what the device is. A way to think about the Neuralink device is like a Fitbit or an Apple Watch with tiny wires or electrodes. Those tiny wires are implanted in the brain and they read and write electrical signals. A lot of people think the brain is this incredibly mysterious thing. It is mysterious in a lot of ways, but it does operate with electrical signals. So if you can read and write those electrical signals, you can interface with the brain. And the device is sized so that it is the same size as the piece of skull that is removed. So if it's like a few centimeters diameter of skull that's removed, we replace that with the device after implanting the tiny wires with the surgical robot. And that enables read-write capability to the neurons. But yes, exactly. It's completely wirelessly. I could have a Neuralink right now, you wouldn't know. And it charges inductively, so you could just basically have an electromagnetic pad that you charge the device with. So yeah, it's like an Apple Watch, exactly. So
except that it's actually a much harder technical challenge to solve, given that there's limit as to how much you eat the brain tissue. Whereas for phones and
Apple Watch,
you don't actually really care if it's sitting on a table.
Sure. Yeah, so it's got to go through scan and stuff as well in our case. So it is a tougher challenge to charge and to have high bandwidth communications, given that it's got to go through skin and hair and stuff.
We have solved it.
But we have solved it, yeah.
Yeah, so our first step with the telepathy is basically to unlock digital independence for people with paralysis and to allow them to control the computer just with their mind without moving their body. And our goal is to provide them the same level of control, functionality, and reliability that I have when I'm using a computer. Even better than the level of control I have.
It's not a high bar for you. To be clear, this guy, he's controlling this with his brain. So you can't see his hands in this video, but he's not using a mouse and keyboard. Just thinking about how to move the cursor and playing Civilization 6.
No eye tracker.
Right, there's no eye tracking.
He's live streaming it. Like, you can go watch this on Twitter.
Just thinking. That's it.
Just thinking.
Just a couple days
ago.
Cursor
move here.
Yeah, this is like last night or 2 nights ago. Something.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think the way he also described it is he's using the...
Yeah.
There's many more videos on the platform. Yeah, so he's streaming that live and also can talk and move his head with the problem multitask.
Yeah, you can also, if you join this live stream, you can ask him questions. He'll tell you all about what it's like to move.
Also, I think, I haven't played Civilization myself, but I think this is actually not easy mode. This is expert mode.
This is Emperor mode.
Emperor mode.
If you have played Civ, Emperor mode is like the highest difficulty level. Just the point is, this is a cognitively demanding task while live streaming, playing the hardest mode of the game. And he's able to do that while moving the cursor.
Talking, engaging with the audience while playing games.
One of the other games he likes to play a lot is chess. I think it gets lost sometimes that he's actually playing speed chess.
Against me, yeah.
Which requires an incredibly high fidelity degree of control and speed of control in order to be able to win.
Also, another cool stuff about our device is that use it anywhere, anytime. Also on a plane, during a flight, while creating really cool memes of cat. Also, our device unlocks things that previously were impossible for our participant. For example, we were able to connect him to his gaming console, Switch, and play Mario Kart with friends and family. And it was lovely to see them playing together after years that he couldn't do it since his injury.
Imagine if you're sitting one row over from this guy and playing. You look over, he's making a cat meme. No hands, no movement. Yeah.
Live in a real world.
Yeah, it's a strange time.
Yeah, and he loves using the device and using independently daily to watch videos, read, play games using the browser. And the key metrics that we care is to make sure our device is actually useful, is to basically the amount of hours he use the device daily and weekly. And we track it since the surgery. And on weeks that he's not too busy and not traveling, he can even reach 70 hours of using the device a week. This is amazing. He would, of course, love to use it more, but need to run. He needs to sleep sometimes, and also, of course, to charge the device once in a while. Hopefully, we'll improve that over time.
I think that maybe not obvious to people who are watching this. Like, it's a normal MacBook he's controlling. This isn't like some limited edition thing where there's only a few options. Like, you can just do anything that you can do on a MacBook Pro. Same one I have on my desk, actually. It's the exact same one.
And maybe another interesting point is that on the first day he used BCI, he was able to break the previous world record for cursor control just by using the brain. And recently he even doubled it and was able to outperform about 10% of our engineered Neuralink. And you can be sure that we are very good in this game and very quick. And if you want to check out how you can do it, you can do it on our website. And it's very addictive games.
Yeah, it's a very simple game. You just have to click on the square. But it actually, even though it sounds silly, it's quite it can be quite it sounds like it can be quite addictive, and it's especially if you get a low score and you think there's no way I gotta. Anyone who wants to try this, I recommend going to the Neuralink.com website and seeing if you can beat Nolan's record. And you will find that's actually quite difficult to do. This is really with version 1 of the device and with only a small percentage of the electrodes that are working. So this is really just the beginning, but even the beginning is twice as good as the world record. This is important to emphasize. The media has a habit of saying that the glass is 10% empty, but actually it's 90% full. I think it's really quite an accomplishment of the Neuralink team to have achieved with the first patient, the first device, twice the world record for the brain-to-computer bandwidth. That's really an astonishing, an amazingly great outcome, and it's only going to get better from here. So the potential is to ultimately get, I think, to megabit level. So that's probably the long-term goal of improving the bandwidth of the brain-computer interface. If you think about like how low the bandwidth normally is between a human and a device, the average bandwidth is extremely low. It's I said less than 1 bit per second over the course of a day. If there are 86,400 seconds in a day, you're outputting less than that number of bits to any given device, except in perhaps very rare circumstances. This is actually quite important for AI, basically for human AI symbiosis, is just being able to communicate at a speed the AI can follow.
Yeah, just to emphasize again, he's performing at this extremely high level with about 15% of his channels. And so we want to mitigate any of the problems that led to that situation. The brain is a fascinating organ. I'll share with you some of the secrets about the brain. During any typical brain surgery, a small amount of air is introduced into the skull. That's because neurosurgeons like to have as much room as possible around the brain. And so there's this little known control mechanism of allowing the concentration in the blood to rise a bit, which allows the brain to either expand or contract depending on where you target that CO2. But typically neurosurgeons will have the brain shrink by lowering CO2. What we're going to do in our future surgeries is keep the CO2 concentration actually quite normal, maybe even slightly elevated. And that'll allow the brain to stay its normal size and shape during surgery. That should eliminate this air pocket that we saw in the first participant. That air pocket, we think, may have contributed to eating up some of the thread slack as the air bubble migrated to be under the implant and push the brain away from the implant. And so that's easy enough to fix. Another consideration that we want to focus on for our upcoming participants is that the brain, think of it like a really complex folded onion. It's layer upon layer of sheets of neurons all over the surface of the brain folded into this odd-looking shape. the folds of the brain travel down deep into the brain, and along with it go those onion layers of neurons. And if we insert very close to one of the folds where there may be very useful information encoded in neurons, we may end up traveling with our threads parallel to some of the layers of neurons that we're most interested in, avoiding them entirely. To avoid that possibility, we're going to insert in our future participants more close to the middle of the apex of the folds, ensuring that we're crossing the layers of interest, layer 5 of the cortex.
I also think that it's important to highlight here those tiny wires that Elon mentioned. They're a fraction of a human hair. They're very flexible, intentionally so, because the brain's constantly moving and you want the electrodes to be moving with the brain, causing less of the scarring. And it's actually impossible for a human, however talented Matthew is, to actually maneuver them. We have a surgical robot that we built that can actually precisely target them in any three-dimensional space, X, Y, as well as Z, with micron level precision, while avoiding vasculature so that you don't disrupt and cause immune response from happening. So we actually have the technology to be able to place them exactly where we want them.
Yeah, it was truly amazing to see the surface of the brain after the robot had inserted all the electrodes on the first participant without a drop of blood in sight. Is really quite an achievement.
Yes, so something that probably most people don't realize is that the brain appears to be somewhat undifferentiated. So if you look at the cortex, it looks like a whole bunch of folds that where maybe it's not obvious just looking at, say, a picture of the brain that the brain is highly differentiated. That you pretty much know exactly where the part of the brain is that controls your right hand and your left hand and your leg and that kind of thing, or vision. It's actually quite precisely located. It's not. Some people might think, look at the brain like, oh, it could be anywhere, but actually, its brain is highly differentiated, even though it doesn't look it. It's yeah.
Do you want to describe how we actually how we identify where to drill the cranium?
We can put a patient that is considering this implant into an MRI, so a functional magnetic resonance imaging machine, and ask them to imagine hand movements that, because of the spinal cord injury, don't happen. But just imagining those hand movements causes these areas of the brain to light up in the fMRI scanner. So we have a pretty good idea, based in fact, for each individual participant, which part of their brain is going to respond to imagined movements of the hand. And so we can map those imagined movements, much as we all do when moving a mouse, to controlling a cursor on a screen, even without the use of a mouse.
Yeah, but anyway, I think this is an important point, that it's not like the part of your brain that controls your hand might be anywhere in the cortex. This is not the case. It's going to be in a very specific region, and it's going to be
precision is key too.
Yeah.
The left-handed, right-handed thing, in my mind too. If you're right-handed, you want the device on the left side, contralateral side to the hand. That's your dominant.
Yeah, the left side of your brain controls the right side of your brain.
Another of the risk mitigations we're looking at in the future is that the implant has a certain size. The depth of the bottom of the implant is actually thinner than the average human skull. And so what we want to be able to do is control the size of the gap under the implant, give the threads that travel from the implant into the brain as much slack as possible. We didn't do this in the first participant because we didn't want to manipulate any of their tissue that we didn't absolutely have to. In upcoming implants, our plan is to sculpt the surface of the skull very intentionally to minimize the gap under the implant, such that the bottom of the implant travels perfectly flush with the normal contour of the inner side of the skull. That will put the implant closer to the brain. It will eliminate some of the tension on the threads, and we think it will reduce some of the tendency of threads to retract.
And we actually built a tool to do.
Yeah, this is a very important detail. You really want the inner contour of the skull to be flush, so that the implant, the brain doesn't want to pucker up into the gap. That's really quite a big deal. Minimizing the air pocket and the implant being flush with the inside contour of the skull are two very important.
The additional benefit here is that you do see some amount of stick up, what we call stick up, so you minor bump in the head, but this actually eliminates that even further.
Yes, really, our goal is that if you run your hand over the top of the skull, you don't feel any bump, you don't feel any device. And that even if someone was bald, you wouldn't really even notice it. And then from the inner contour of the skull, the brain, from a physical standpoint, doesn't really notice that there's a divot in the skull, because there's no divot.
Okay, another aspect of the human brain that obviously differs from any of the animals that we tested in is that the human brain is a lot bigger. And so you may not realize that means the human brain moves quite a bit more than any of these other smaller brained creatures. And so when we open the skull, we see the brain travel toward and away from the robot about 3 millimeters in total as the heart beats and the breathing takes place. And so that movement, it adds a small challenge for the robot in precisely choosing a depth to insert each thread. It's not an enormous challenge, and we've already upgraded